My name's Isabella, and I'm 21 years old. I just finished my third year at art college, and let me tell you, it's been one hell of a ride. But before I get into all that, you need to know where I come from. I grew up in a house where I never felt at home. My parents, Tom and Sarah, always made it clear that my older sister, Emily, was their golden child. She's 4 years older than me and has always been a thorn in my side. From the day I was born, Emily seemed to hate me. She'd tease me, break my toys, and make my life miserable. And my parents? They'd just laugh it off, saying, "Oh, that's just how sisters are." But it wasn't normal. I remember when I was 14, I had this huge crush on a boy at school. His name was Jake, and I thought he was the cutest thing ever. I'd spend hours drawing portraits of him in secret, hiding them under my mattress where I thought no one would find them. But Emily found them. And you know what she did? She pinned them up on the school bulletin board for everyone to see. I still remember walking into school that day. The laughter, the pointing, the whispers. It felt like the whole world was crashing down around me. And Jake? He came up to me, all awkward and stuttering. Isabella. I saw the drawings. Look, you're nice and all, but I don't like you that way. I ran home crying that day. My parents were in the kitchen when I burst through the door, tears streaming down my face. Mom, Dad, Emily humiliated me at school. She found my private drawings in. But before I could finish, Emily waltzed in, a smug grin on her face. "Oh, come on, Izzy," she said, using the nickname I hated. "It was just a bit of fun. Not my fault you can't take a joke." And you know what my parents did? They laughed. They actually laughed. "Sweetie," my mom said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes, "you really need to toughen up. It's not Emily's fault you're such a crybaby." That's why, when I got accepted into art college, I was over the moon. It was my ticket out of that house, away from the constant mockery and belittlement. My grandmother was the only one who ever showed me any real love. She was the one who encouraged my art, who told me I had talent. When I got accepted, she insisted on paying for my tuition. "Isabella," she said, her eyes twinkling, "you've got a gift. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'll make sure you get the education you deserve." For 3 years, she paid for everything. My tuition, my supplies, even some extra for living expenses. But then, just before my final year, she got sick. I remember sitting by her bedside, holding her frail hand. She looked at me with those kind eyes of hers and said, "Isabella, my dear, I'm so proud of you. You're going to do great things." Then she turned to my parents, who were standing at the foot of the bed. "Tom, Sarah, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll pay for Isabella's final year. She needs to finish her education." My parents nodded solemnly. "Of course, Mom," my dad said. "We promise." Grandma died a week later. At the reading of her will, we found out she'd left her house to my parents and her jewelry to Emily and me. Emily, of course, immediately grabbed the diamond tiara. "I'll take this," she announced. "Isabella can have the ring. She doesn't care about jewelry anyway, right, Izzy?" I didn't argue. She was right, I didn't care much for jewelry. So I took the diamond ring and put it in a safety deposit box at the bank. I made friends quickly in college. There was Zoe, a punk rocker with a talent for abstract art, and Marcus, a quiet guy who could make sculptures that took your breath away. They didn't care about my family drama. To them, I was just Isabella, the girl who could paint like nobody's business. "Hey, Bella," Zoe said one day, using the nickname I actually liked. "There's a tattoo parlor downtown looking for someone to draw designs. You should apply." I was hesitant at first. My parents would flip if they knew I was working in a tattoo parlor. But then I thought, why should I care what they think? So I applied, and to my surprise, I got the job. The owner, a burly guy named Mike with more ink than skin, took one look at my portfolio and said, "You're hired, kid." For the first time in my life, I was earning my own money. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't tell my parents or Emily about it. I could already hear Emily's mocking voice. "Oh, little Izzy's drawing pictures for thugs now? How cute." College life suited me. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my grandmother proud. My professors praised my work, and I even won a few small competitions. But more importantly, I was happy. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was finishing up my third year. As the summer break approached, a familiar dread settled in my stomach. I had to go home. I opened the door and stepped into chaos. The living room was full of people, all bustling about with excitement. In the center of it all stood Emily, beaming as she held up a white dress. My mother noticed me first. "Oh, Isabella," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "You're home. We weren't expecting you so soon." I stood there, stunned. "Emily's getting married? When did this happen?" Emily turned to me, her smile turning into a smirk. "Oh, didn't anyone tell you? I guess we've all been so busy with the preparations, it must have slipped our minds." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My own sister was getting married, and no one had even bothered to tell me. "Who's the lucky guy?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Richard," Emily said, pulling forward a tall, handsome man I hadn't noticed before. "Isn't he dreamy?" Richard gave me a polite smile and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Isabella. I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, wondering what exactly he'd heard. Knowing Emily, probably nothing good. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of excited chatter downstairs. Emily was holding court at the breakfast table, surrounded by our parents and a couple of her bridesmaids. As I listened to their conversation, I learned that Emily had broken up with her previous boyfriend at our parents' insistence. Apparently, he'd been mixed up with some dangerous crowd. "Thank God you listened to us, sweetie," Mom said, patting Emily's hand. "Richard is such a better match for you. And his family is so well off." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Of course, that's what they cared about. "Speaking of Richard," Emily said, turning to me with a smirk, "he's taking me out to dinner tonight. Not that you'd know anything about that, right, Izzy? Still haven't found a boyfriend?" They all laughed, and I gripped my coffee mug tighter, willing myself not to cry. Some things never change. As the days passed, I tried to stay out of everyone's way. I spent most of my time in my room, sketching and counting down the days until I could leave. But one evening, I couldn't avoid the family dinner. We were all seated around the table when Emily dropped her bombshell. "I've decided to wear Grandma's tiara for the wedding," she announced. "It'll look perfect with my dress." "Oh, that's a wonderful idea," Mom exclaimed. Emily wasn't done. "But you know what would make it even better? If I had a matching piece to go with it. Like, oh, I don't know, a ring?" I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I knew exactly where this was going. Mom's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's right. Isabella, didn't Grandma leave you a ring?" I nodded slowly, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. "Well, there you go," Emily said, clapping her hands together. "Izzy, you'll let me borrow the ring for the wedding, won't you?" I put down my fork. "Borrow? For how long?" Emily laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, silly Izzy. I mean, you'll give it to me. For keeps." But Grandma left that to me," I protested weakly. "Come on, Isabella," Dad said, his voice stern. "Don't be selfish. It's your sister's wedding day." I looked around the table, hoping to see someone, anyone, on my side. But all I saw were expectant faces, waiting for me to give in. Like always. "Isabella," Dad said, his voice cold. "Either you give the ring to your sister, or we won't pay for your final year of college." The room fell silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But But you promised Grandma, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. Emily let out a harsh laugh. Oh, please. No one cares about promises made to some half-witted old woman. I stood up so fast, my chair fell over. How dare you talk about Grandma like that? I shouted. That's enough, Dad roared. Isabella, you have a choice to make. The ring or your education. Decide. I looked at their faces, Dad's anger, Mom's disappointment, Emily's smug satisfaction. In that moment, I knew I had lost. Again. With shaking hands, I took off the necklace where I kept the key to my safety deposit box. I handed it to Emily. The morning after the ring incident, I cornered Emily in the kitchen. When exactly is your wedding? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily looked up from her coffee, a sly smile playing on her lips. It's on the 29th. Why, planning to ruin it? I ignored her jab. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to get away from this toxic environment. No, I replied coolly. I'm going to visit a friend from college. I'll be back in time for the wedding. I packed my bags and left that afternoon, heading to my friend Zoe's place in the next city over. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Zoe and I spent the week exploring art galleries, hitting up local cafes, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed. But my moment of peace was shattered exactly 1 week later. I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw it, photos of Emily's wedding. My sister, resplendent in white, the diamond tiara glittering on her head, and my ring sparkling on her finger. The caption read, "Just married. Off to the Maldives with my hunky husband." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. With shaking hands, I dialed Mom's number. Why didn't you invite me to the wedding? Emily told me the wrong date. There was a long pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line. Isabella, your sister, she didn't want you there. She said you'd ruin her perfect day. We thought it was best not to tell you. I felt like I was going to be sick. How could you do this to me? I'm your daughter too. Don't be dramatic, Mom chimed in. It's not like you really wanted to be there anyway, right? I hung up, my whole body shaking with anger and hurt. A few days later, I returned home, only to find Emily had also returned from her honeymoon. I walked into the living room to find her, Mom, and Dad huddled together, looking at apartment listings. I cleared my throat, and they all looked up. Don't forget about my tuition, I said, my voice small. You promised to pay for my last year if I gave Emily the ring. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Actually, Isabella, we've decided to use that money as a down payment on Emily's apartment instead. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. But you promised. You swore to Grandma. Plans change, Mom said dismissively. Emily needs it more. I'm sure you can figure something out. Emily was still laughing, a cruel, mocking sound that made my blood boil. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at her, grabbing a fistful of her hair. Emily screeched, and suddenly everyone was shouting. Dad yanked me away, his face red with anger. That's enough, he roared. Isabella, get out of this house right now. I ran to my room, threw some clothes in a bag, and stormed out, slamming the front door behind me. As I walked away from the house, my heart pounding and my cheeks wet with tears, I realized something. I found myself back at Zoe's place, feeling lost and broken. For days, I barely left her guest room, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the walls. Zoe tried her best to comfort me, but I was inconsolable. A week passed in this haze of despair. Then, one morning, as I listlessly checked my emails, I saw a message that made my heart stop. Congratulations! You are the winner of the annual art school competition. Your prize includes a full scholarship for your final year of studies. I read the email 3 times, not believing my eyes. Then I let out a scream that brought Zoe running. I thrust my phone at her, happy tears streaming down my face. I won. I won a scholarship. I can finish school. Zoe's eyes widened as she read the email, then she pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. "Oh my God, Bella. This is amazing." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I could finish my degree without my parents' help. I could make my own way. When the new semester started, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. Between my classes and my part-time job at the tattoo parlor, I barely had time to think about my family drama. Months passed, and I slowly started to heal. One day, I was hanging out with my classmate, Jake, who worked part-time at a local pawn shop. We were chatting about our day when he mentioned something that caught my attention. "You won't believe what happened during my shift today," he said. "This girl came in with the most beautiful diamond necklace and ring I've ever seen. Must have been worth a fortune." My heart skipped a beat. "What did she look like?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jake described a woman who sounded exactly like Emily. "Can you draw the jewelry for me?" I asked, my hands shaking slightly. Jake looked confused, but complied. As I watched him sketch, my suspicions were confirmed. The necklace was the one Emily had always bragged about, and the ring, it was my grandmother's ring. "Jake," I said, my mouth dry, "is there any way you could get me the security footage from the pawn shop?" Jake must have seen the desperation in my eyes because he finally nodded. "Okay, I'll see what I can do." A few days later, Jake handed me a USB drive. "Here," he said. "But you didn't get this from me, okay?" I nodded gratefully and rushed back to my dorm room. With trembling hands, I plugged in the drive and opened the video file. There was Emily, clear as day, handing over the jewelry. But what made my jaw drop was what happened next. As she turned to leave, a man entered the frame. Emily threw her arms around him, kissing him passionately. It wasn't Richard. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding. As the man turned slightly, I gasped. I recognized him. It was Emily's ex-boyfriend, the one our parents had made her break up with because of his criminal connections. I sat back, my mind reeling. Emily had pawned her precious jewelry, including my grandmother's ring, and was apparently cheating on her husband with her criminal ex-boyfriend. Part of me wanted to immediately send this video to my parents, to Richard, to everyone who had ever believed Emily's lies. But another part of me hesitated. This was big. Too big to act on impulsively. Months passed, and I thought I'd put my family drama behind me. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister. "Isabella, darling, I have wonderful news," she chirped, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Your sister is pregnant. Can you believe it? They're having a big announcement party next week. Isn't it exciting?" My heart sank. Of course, another family event I hadn't been invited to. "That's great, Aunt Lisa. Thanks for letting me know." After hanging up, I sat on my bed, conflicted. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue cutting ties with my toxic family. But another part of me, the part that still held on to the video from the pawn shop, knew this might be my chance. A week later, I found myself standing outside my parents' house. Cars lined the street, and I could hear laughter and chatter from inside. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Mom opened the door, her smile instantly fading when she saw me. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" Pushing past her, I walked into the living room. The chatter died down as people noticed me. Emily, standing in the center of the room with Richard, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What is she doing here?" Emily hissed. Dad's voice boomed through the room. "Isabella, get out of this house immediately. You're not welcome here." Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. I saw Richard's parents exchange worried glances. Mom, always one for saving face, plastered on a fake smile. "I'm so sorry, everyone. We've had to distance ourselves from Isabella. She's become quite greedy and unworthy of our family name." The room erupted into arguments. Some relatives defended me, while others sided with my parents. I raised my voice. "I have something to say." Gradually, the room quieted down. All eyes were on me. I turned to Emily. "Congratulations on your pregnancy, sis. But I have to ask, why aren't you wearing Grandma's tiara and ring?" Emily's face went pale. Her mother-in-law spoke up, "Now that you mention it, I haven't seen that beautiful ring in a while." "Emily, dear, where is it?" Emily stuttered, I sent them for restoration. They needed cleaning." I nodded slowly, pulling out my phone. "That's interesting. Because I have a video here that tells a different story." The color drained from Emily's face as I connected my phone to the TV. The security footage from the pawnshop began to play. There was Emily, clear as day, pawning the jewelry. And then, the moment that made everyone in the room gasp, Emily, throwing herself into the arms of a man who was definitely not Richard, kissing him passionately. The moment the video ended, chaos erupted in the living room. Richard's face contorted with rage and pain as he turned to Emily. "Emily, what is this? Who is that man?" he shouted, his voice cracking. Emily burst into tears, mascara streaming down her face. I can explain." Richard's mother stepped forward, her voice ice cold. "I think we all deserve an explanation, Emily." Richard's father, a stern-looking man, spoke up. "I think we need a paternity test." Immediately. As accusations flew and tempers flared, I quietly slipped out of the house. I had done what I came to do. The truth was out, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Emily's deception came to light. Through the family grapevine, I learned that she had been secretly meeting her ex-boyfriend, the one with criminal connections, behind Richard's back. She had been spending Richard's money on him and even pawned her jewelry to pay off his debts. The paternity test results were the final nail in the coffin. The baby wasn't Richard's, it was her ex-boyfriend's. Richard, understandably devastated, filed for divorce. He sued Emily for a substantial sum, citing emotional damages and financial fraud. Her ex-boyfriend, upon learning of the pregnancy, vanished without a trace, leaving Emily to face the consequences alone. My parents, who had always put Emily on a pedestal, were forced to face the harsh reality of her actions. They had to take out a significant loan to help Emily pay the compensation Richard demanded. Their golden child had fallen from grace, and they were left to pick up the pieces. In a twisted turn of events, they tried to blame me for everything. Mom left a voicemail on my phone, her voice bitter and accusing. "Are you happy now, Isabella? You've ruined your sister's life. I hope you're proud of yourself." I deleted the message without responding. Their words no longer had the power to hurt me. As for me, I returned to college, threw myself into my studies, and focused on building the life I wanted. I cut off all communication with my family, changing my phone number and email address. The toxic cycle was finally broken. It's been 2 years since that fateful day when I exposed Emily's lies. I graduated from art college with honors, my final project earning praise from both professors and local art critics. Now, at 23, I'm working at the Harmony Art Gallery in the city. It's a dream come true, surrounded by beautiful artwork every day, helping to curate exhibitions, and even organizing events for up-and-coming artists. But that's not all. I've been painting in my free time, and to my surprise and delight, my work has caught the eye of several collectors. I haven't forgotten my roots, though. I still create tattoo sketches in my spare time. It's become a cherished hobby, a link to the past that reminds me of how far I've come. Some of my designs have even been featured in tattoo magazines, which never fails to make me smile. As for my family, well, that's a complicated story. I've maintained relationships with a few aunts and cousins who stood by me during the fallout. They keep me updated on the family drama, though I try not to let it affect me anymore. From what I hear, Emily is still living with our parents. She's unemployed, struggling to raise her child alone. Mom and Dad, facing financial troubles of their own, are constantly pressuring her to find a job and move out. The arguments are frequent and bitter, I'm told. I haven't spoken to my parents or Emily since that day. They tried reaching out a few times in the beginning, guilt-tripping messages, angry voicemails, but I stood firm in my decision to cut ties. Eventually, they stopped trying. On a brighter note, I've been dating a wonderful guy named Alex for the past year. He's a graphic designer I met at a gallery event. He's kind, supportive, and best of all, he understands my passion for art. We're talking about moving in together soon, another step towards building the life I want. My name is Sarah, and I've been a dentist for over 2 decades now. It's a career I love, but the path to get here wasn't easy. As I sit in my office, staring at the framed diploma on the wall, I can't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that led me to this point. I grew up in a household where I always felt like the second choice. My parents, Jack and Linda, never tried to hide their preference for my younger sister, Emily. She was born when I was 10, and from that moment on, it was clear who the favorite child was. When it came time for college, I knew I wanted to pursue dentistry. It had been my dream since I was a little girl, fascinated by the way my pediatric dentist could make even the scariest procedures feel like magic. "Mom, Dad, I've been accepted to the dental program at State University," I announced one evening at dinner, barely able to contain my excitement. The silence that followed was deafening. My father cleared his throat. "That's nice, Sarah. But you know we can't afford that. We're saving for Emily's future." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But I've worked so hard. My grades are perfect, I thought. "You thought wrong," my mother cut in, her voice cold. "We've always been clear about our priorities. Emily has a bright future ahead of her. Well, you'll find something suitable, I'm sure." I ran from the table, tears streaming down my face. The next day, I visited my grandparents, Robert and Margaret. They'd always been kinder to me, more understanding. When I told them what happened, my grandfather's face turned red with anger. "Those fools," he muttered. "Don't you worry, Sarah. We'll make sure you get to that school." True to their word, my grandparents scraped together every penny they could to help me with tuition. I worked multiple jobs, studied harder than I ever had before, and eventually graduated at the top of my class. During my final year of dental school, I met Tom. He was charming, handsome, and seemed to genuinely care about me. We married shortly after graduation, despite my parents' objections. "You're making a mistake," my mother hissed at me during the reception. "He's not good enough for this family." I ignored her, convinced that for once in my life, I'd made the right choice. How wrong I was. The first few years were good. We had 2 beautiful children, Max and Lily, and I started building my dental practice. But as time went on, Tom changed. The charming man I'd fallen in love with disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. It started with the drinking. A beer or 2 after work became a 6-pack, then a bottle of whiskey. He'd come home late, reeking of alcohol, picking fights over nothing. I endured it for years, hoping he'd change back into the man I'd married. But one night, as I watched him nearly drop our infant daughter while in a drunken stupor, I knew it was over. The divorce was messy, but in the end, I got custody of the kids and kept my practice. The day I told my parents about the divorce, I foolishly hoped for some support. Instead, I was met with cold disappointment and blame. "I'm sure you're exaggerating," my mother said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Tom always seemed like such a nice man. You probably drove him to drink with your nagging." That was the last straw. I gathered my children and left, vowing never to seek their approval again. Meanwhile, my sister Emily's life seemed picture perfect. She'd become a psychologist, married a successful businessman named David, and had 2 boys of her own. My parents never missed an opportunity to remind me how much better she was doing. "Emily just bought a new house in that fancy neighborhood," my mother would casually mention during our increasingly rare phone calls. "Her practice is really taking off. It's so nice to have a daughter we can be proud of." Years passed, and I built a successful dental practice. I was doing well financially, even able to buy a nice apartment in a good area of town. Ironically, there were times when my parents would call, asking for money. "Sarah, your father and I are a bit short this month. We were hoping you could help out," my mother would say, her tone sugary sweet. Despite everything, I always sent them what they needed. Part of me hoped that by being generous, they might finally see my worth. But their attitude never changed. One day, I received a call from Emily. Our parents had passed away suddenly in a car accident. I was devastated, not just by their loss, but by the realization that we'd never have a chance to reconcile. "I'm in the Maldives with David," Emily said, her voice crackling over the international line. "Could you handle the funeral arrangements? We'll try to get back as soon as we can." So there I was, planning my parents' funeral while my sister lounged on a beach halfway across the world. I threw myself into the task, determined to give them a beautiful send-off, despite our troubled relationship. The day of the funeral arrived, and Emily finally showed up, tanned and seemingly carefree. Right after the funeral, a lawyer approached us. "We need to discuss the will." I hadn't even thought about the will. Surely, despite everything, my parents wouldn't completely forget about me? But as the lawyer read out the details, it became clear that they had done exactly that. Everything, the house, their savings, even family heirlooms, had been left to Emily. There wasn't so much as a mention of my name. As I drove home that day, I made a decision. I was done seeking approval from people who would never give it. I had my children, my career, and my own life. It was time to live it on my terms. After the funeral, my relationship with Emily became even more distant. We rarely spoke, save for obligatory holiday greetings and birthday wishes via Skype. I'd catch glimpses of my nephews, Tommy and Jake, during these calls, but it was hardly enough to form a real relationship with them. From what I could see, the boys were growing up to be quite a handful. During one memorable video call, I watched a 6-year-old Tommy throw a tantrum because Emily wouldn't buy him a new tablet. "But I want it now," he screamed, his face red with anger. Emily just smiled indulgently. "Now, sweetie, we can't always get what we want right away. We'll talk about it later, okay?" I couldn't help but interject. "Emily, don't you think you should be a bit firmer with him? That behavior isn't appropriate for his age." My sister's face hardened. "I'm a psychologist, Sarah. I think I know how to raise my children without causing childhood trauma. They need to feel free to express themselves." As the years went by, my own children grew up and moved out to start their own lives. Max became a successful software engineer, while Lily followed in my footsteps and went to dental school. I was immensely proud of them both. With the kids gone, I found myself enjoying the quiet life of an empty nester. I adopted a cat, Mr. Whiskers, who quickly became my constant companion. My days fell into a comfortable routine of work, home, and the occasional dinner with friends. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, my peaceful life was shattered by a frantic knocking at my door. I opened it to find Emily standing there, mascara running down her face, with Tommy and Jake in tow. "Sarah," she sobbed, "I need your help. David and I had a huge fight, and I just need a place to stay for a while." I hesitated for a moment, remembering all the years of hurt and neglect. But looking at my sister's tear-stained face and the confused expressions of my nephews, I knew I couldn't turn them away. "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. As they filed into my apartment, I got my first real look at Tommy and Jake in years. Tommy, now 9, had a sullen look on his face, while 6-year-old Jake was bouncing off the walls, touching everything in sight. "Jake, honey, please don't touch that," I said gently as he reached for an antique vase. He ignored me completely, knocking the vase to the floor where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Emily barely reacted. "Oh, boys will be boys," she said with a weak laugh. "We'll replace it, won't we, Jake?" Jake just shrugged and moved on to the next breakable object. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that they were guests in my home and that this was just temporary. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that Emily had no intention of leaving anytime soon. My once tidy apartment descended into chaos. Toys and clothes were strewn everywhere, the walls were covered in crayon drawings, and the constant noise was driving me to my wits' end. One particularly trying afternoon, I returned home from a long day at the dental office to find my living room in complete disarray. The floor was littered with toys, crushed snacks, and what appeared to be the stuffing from one of my throw pillows. In the center of it all sat Tommy and Jake, gleefully engaged in what looked like a food fight with my good china as ammunition. "Boys," I exclaimed, shock and frustration evident in my voice. "What on earth are you doing?" They barely glanced in my direction, continuing their rambunctious play without missing a beat. I looked around frantically for Emily, finally spotting her lounging on the balcony, engrossed in her phone. "Emily," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, "have you seen what the boys are doing?" She glanced up briefly, a look of mild annoyance crossing her face. "They're just playing, Sarah. Don't be such a killjoy." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head before speaking again. "Emily, they're destroying my home. This has to stop." Emily rolled her eyes and reluctantly got up from her chair. She sauntered into the living room, surveying the chaos with a disinterested eye. "All right, boys, that's enough for now. Why don't you go watch some TV?" The boys cheered and raced off to the guest room, leaving the mess behind. I stared at my sister in disbelief. "That's it? You're not going to make them clean up?" "Oh, relax," Emily said dismissively. "I'll take care of it later. You're always so uptight, Sarah. It's not good for your blood pressure." As the days wore on, I found myself becoming more and more stressed. The constant noise, the mess, the lack of respect for my home and my rules, it was all taking a toll on me. Even Mr. Whiskers, my usually affectionate cat, had taken to hiding under my bed most of the time, only emerging for food and to use his litter box. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, a task that had somehow fallen solely to me despite Emily and the boys being my guests, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Johnson, my elderly neighbor from the floor below, standing there with a stern expression on her face. "Dr. Sarah," she began, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "I've always considered you a model neighbor, but these past few weeks have been unbearable. The noise from your apartment is constant. I can hear screaming and things breaking at all hours of the day and night. What on earth is going on up here?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Johnson. My sister and her children are staying with me temporarily, and I'm afraid the boys can be a bit energetic." Mrs. Johnson's expression softened slightly. "I understand children can be lively, dear, but this goes beyond that. And it's not just the noise. Have you seen what they've done to the hallway?" She gestured for me to follow her. We walked to the stairwell, and I gasped in horror. The walls were covered in graffiti, crude drawings, and misspelled words spray-painted in garish colors. I recognized Tommy's handiwork immediately. This is unacceptable," I stammered, mortified. "I had no idea." "I'll clean it up right away, Mrs. Johnson. And I promise, it won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," she replied firmly. "Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll have to report this to the building management and the appropriate authorities." Once she was out of sight, I leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the mess my life had become. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and marched back to my apartment. As I opened the door, I was met with the sound of Tommy and Jake's laughter, punctuated by the crash of something else breaking. "Boys," I said firmly, "turn that off. We have work to do." They ignored me, as usual. I strode over and switched off the TV. "Hey," Tommy protested. "We were playing that." "Not anymore," I replied. "You're going to clean up the mess you made in the hallway. Come with me, now." Grumbling and whining, they followed me to the stairwell. I handed them scrub brushes and a bucket of soapy water. "Start cleaning," I instructed. They stared at me in disbelief. But Mom said we don't have to do chores," Tommy stammered. Your mom isn't here right now, I said. And in my house, we clean up our messes. They half-heartedly swiped at the walls, more interested in splashing each other than actually cleaning. I was about to intervene when I heard footsteps on the stairs. To my surprise, it was Mrs. Johnson's son, Mark, in his police uniform. He must have just gotten off duty. "Everything okay here, Dr. Sarah?" he asked, eyeing the boys suspiciously. Sensing an opportunity, I explained the situation. Mark's face hardened as he turned to Tommy and Jake. "Listen up, boys," he said sternly. "Vandalism is a serious offense. If you don't clean this up properly, we're going to have some real problems. Understand?" The boys' eyes widened in fear. They nodded vigorously and began scrubbing the walls with newfound enthusiasm. I was supervising their progress when I heard the elevator ding. Emily stepped out, fresh from a trip to the beauty salon, her hair and nails immaculate. Her jaw dropped when she saw the scene before her. "What the hell is going on here?" she shrieked. I calmly explained the situation, but Emily wasn't having it. "How dare you force my children to do manual labor?" she yelled. "This is cruel and unusual punishment." "Cruel?" I shot back, my patience finally snapping. "Cruel is letting them destroy other people's property without consequences." Emily grabbed the boys' hands. "Come on, we're leaving. I won't let you be subjected to this abuse." The next few days were tense. Emily and the boys stayed, but they barely spoke to me. I was starting to think things couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. I came home from work one afternoon to find my apartment eerily quiet. "Hello?" I called out. A pitiful meow answered me. I followed the sound to find Mr. Whiskers huddled in a corner, his fur a startling shade of blue. "Oh my God," I gasped. The poor cat was covered in paint, frantically trying to lick it off. I screamed in horror and anger. Scooping up Mr. Whiskers, I wrapped him in a towel and rushed him to the vet, my heart pounding. The vet's diagnosis was grim. "He's ingested a significant amount of paint," she told me. "We'll need to keep him overnight for treatment." Leaving Mr. Whiskers at the clinic was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I returned home, shaking with fury. Emily was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I explained to her what happened to Mr. Whiskers, demanding she discipline the boys and help clean up the mess they'd made. Emily shrugged. "It's just a cat, Sarah. Don't be so dramatic." I couldn't believe my ears. "Just a cat? He could die, Emily." "Well, that's not my problem," she said dismissively. "And neither is the cleaning. It's your apartment, after all." The next morning, I arrived at my dental practice earlier than usual. My mind was reeling from the events of the past few weeks, and I knew I needed to get to the bottom of this situation. With a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. "David, I'm sorry to bother you," I began, "but I need to understand what's going on. Why did you and Emily have a fight? When is she planning to come back home?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, David let out a heavy sigh. "Sarah, I'm afraid Emily won't be coming back. We're getting divorced." David's story came pouring out, each revelation more shocking than the last. He told me how Emily had quit her psychology practice years ago, refusing to work or even help around the house. Their home had fallen into disrepair, and the children were completely out of control. "And then there were the vacations," he went on. "She'd jet off without me or the kids, using the money from your parents' inheritance. I thought she was just taking some time for herself, but..." His voice trailed off, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "But what, David?" "She was cheating on me, Sarah. Multiple times, with different men. God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I had to get a DNA test for the boys. Thankfully, they're mine, but after all that, I just couldn't do it anymore. I filed for divorce and asked her to leave." After finishing the call with David, I sat at my desk, trying to process everything I'd learned. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Emily wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. She was using me as a fallback, a free place to stay while her life fell apart. That evening, I confronted Emily. The boys were in the guest room, engrossed in their video games as usual, while Emily lounged on my couch, scrolling through her phone. "Emily, we need to talk," I said firmly, sitting across from her. "I spoke to David today." "Is it true? Are you really getting divorced?" Emily shrugged, an air of indifference about her. "Yeah, it's true. David and I are over. I'm tired of him and his expectations. But don't worry, sis. You'll help me out, right? After all, that's what sisters are for." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Help you out? Emily, you've turned my life upside down. You're not even trying to get back on your feet. What about your inheritance? Surely you can use that to find your own place." She laughed dismissively. "Oh, that money? It's gone, Sarah. There were barely crumbs left anyway." I felt my blood begin to boil. "Crumbs? Emily, our parents left you over $200,000. How could you possibly have blown through all that money?" Emily just shrugged again, reaching for her phone. "Life's expensive, Sarah. You wouldn't understand." In that moment, something inside me snapped. Years of resentment, weeks of frustration, all came bubbling to the surface. "No, you're the one who doesn't understand," I said, my voice low and controlled. "I've had enough. Get a job, start disciplining the boys, contribute to this household, or get out. You have 1 week, Emily. 1 week to show me you're serious about turning things around." Emily's eyes widened in shock. For the first time since she'd arrived, she seemed to realize I wasn't going to back down. A few days after my ultimatum to Emily, I returned home from a long day at the dental office. As I approached my apartment door, I was struck by an unusual silence. No shouting, no crashes, no sounds of destruction. It was peaceful. Warily, I entered the apartment. "Emily?" I called out. No response. I found Tommy and Jake sitting quietly on the couch, their eyes red and puffy as if they'd been crying. My heart sank. "Boys, where's your mother?" I asked gently. Tommy wordlessly handed me a piece of paper. With trembling hands, I unfolded it and began to read. "Dear Sarah, I've realized that motherhood just isn't for me. I'm still young and I want to live my life. I've met someone, he's young, exciting, and doesn't have any baggage. We're leaving town together. You're always going on about responsibility and all that boring stuff, so here's your chance to put your money where your mouth is. The boys are your problem now. You're an old maid anyway, so you might as well be useful and raise them. Don't try to contact me. By the time you read this, I'll be long gone. Emily." I collapsed onto the sofa, my mind reeling. How could she do this? How could she abandon her own children? With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. When he answered, I could barely get the words out. "David, it's Sarah. You need to come over right away. It's about the boys." Within an hour, David was at my door. I handed him Emily's note without a word. As he read it, his face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, a deep sadness. "Oh, boys," he sighed, kneeling down to hug Tommy and Jake. "I'm so sorry." Over the next few hours, David and I talked, trying to figure out what to do. It was clear that the boys needed stability, and David was determined to provide that. "I'll take them home," he said firmly. "And first thing tomorrow, I'm going to file for full custody." I nodded, relief washing over me. "I think that's for the best." "And David, I'll help in any way I can. I'll testify, provide character witnesses, whatever you need." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. David filed for full custody, and I found myself recounting Emily's behavior to stern-faced judges and social workers. In the end, the decision was swift. Emily, who never even showed up for the hearings, was stripped of her parental rights. David was granted full custody of Tommy and Jake. As the dust settled, I found myself adjusting to a new normal. I visited David and the boys often, marveling at the changes in their household. David had hired a part-time nanny to help out, but he was also making a concerted effort to be more present in his sons' lives. One sunny Saturday, about a month after everything had happened, I visited their home. I was amazed to find Tommy setting the table for lunch, while Jake was helping David prepare sandwiches in the kitchen. Aunt Sarah, they both cried, running to hug me. I embraced them tightly, noticing how much calmer and happier they seemed. "They're doing so well," I remarked to David as we watched the boys play in the backyard after lunch. "You're doing a great job." 5 years have passed, and life has taken unexpected turns. I'm still practicing dentistry, finding fulfillment in my work and enjoying quiet evenings with Mr. Whiskers, my faithful feline companion. Tommy, now 14, has become something of a local celebrity. His graffiti art, once a source of frustration, has evolved into a genuine talent. He's a popular blogger, showcasing his work online and even getting featured in the news. His success has brought him a decent income, unusual for someone his age. One Sunday afternoon, David and the boys were visiting me for our weekly family dinner. We were catching up on Tommy's latest art project when there was an unexpected knock at the door. To everyone's shock, it was Emily. She barged in, eyes fixed on Tommy. "I hear you're making quite a bit of money now," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "Mommy needs her share." David stepped forward, his face stern. "You have no right to any of it, Emily." He pulled out a document from his wallet. "You were stripped of your parental rights years ago. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." Emily's face contorted with anger, but seeing our united front, she turned and left without another word. We haven't seen her since. As for me, I continue to work and enjoy life's simple pleasures. I stay in touch with my own children, now adults themselves, cherishing our relationship. This unexpected journey has taught me the true meaning of family. It's not always about blood, but about love, support, and being there for each other through thick and thin.